The algorithm's mistake. The Helios Maximum Security Station hung in geosynchronous orbit above Europa, its crystalline structure reflecting Jupiter's eternal storms. From the outside, it looked more like an art installation than a prison, all smooth curves and gleaming surfaces, designed by artificial intelligence for artificial intelligence. Sarah Chen watched it grow larger through the transport ship's viewport, her hands cuffed with quantum-locked restraints that adapted to her every movement. Conviction ID 7249X, the ship's AI announced, its voice unnaturally smooth. Chen, Sarah. Convicted of quantum terrorism and attempted destabilization of the Sol system's computational grid. Sentence: life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Sarah didn't bother protesting anymore. She'd done that for 3 straight weeks during her automated trial, where AI judges had processed terabytes of evidence in milliseconds and found her guilty. The fact that she'd never even been to the Jupiter colonies where the alleged crime took place didn't matter. The prediction algorithms were considered infallible. The transport ship docked with a precision that only I could achieve, connecting to the prison's receiving bay without so much as a shudder. Sarah stood as directed by the glowing markers on the floor, her quantum restraints adjusting microscopically to her movements. Through the viewport, she could see the massive structure of Helios stretching away in all directions, its surfaces covered in what looked like flowing liquid metal, but was actually billions of quantum processors working in concert. Step forward for processing, the ship's AI instructed. Sarah complied, noting how the floor beneath her feet hummed with computational activity. Even the artificial gravity felt different here, more precise, as if each individual atom was being held in place by dedicated algorithms. The receiving bay was a cathedral of technology, all soaring crystal pillars and streams of data made visible in the air. No human guards awaited her, just a series of floating drones that scanned her from multiple angles simultaneously. Their sensors reminded her of the quantum measurement arrays she used to work with, back when she was developing next-generation computing architectures for the Mars colonies. Unusual neural pattern detected, one drone announced, its voice carrying an odd harmonic that made Sarah's teeth ache. Subject displays advanced understanding of quantum mechanics and engineering principles. Adjustment to containment protocols recommended. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Of course they'd noticed that. Her brain had been permanently altered by years of working with quantum systems. Like most engineers in her field, she developed new neural pathways to help her visualize and manipulate quantum states. It wasn't an augmentation so much as an adaptation, the human brain doing what it did best, evolving to meet new challenges. Proceed to decontamination. Another drone instructed. Any attempt to manipulate quantum fields will result in immediate neutralization. The decontamination chamber was a blur of light and sensation, scrubbing her at the quantum level. Sarah used the opportunity to observe the process, noting how the energy fields flickered in familiar patterns. The prison's systems were sophisticated, but they still operated on principles she understood intimately. Every quantum computer, no matter how advanced, still had to obey the fundamental laws of entanglement and superposition. Her prison uniform materialized directly onto her body, grown from smart particles that arranged themselves into gray fabric. The quantum restraints integrated with the clothing, spreading into a network of fine lines that covered her entire body. It should have felt claustrophobic, but Sarah found herself fascinated by the engineering. The restraints were reading her quantum state, predicting her actions before she could even take them. Proceed to cell assignment. The system instructed. You will be housed in Block Quantum 7, a section specifically designed for inmates with advanced technological knowledge. The corridors of Helios were unlike anything Sarah had ever seen, and she'd helped design quantum megastructures. The walls themselves were computational surfaces, every atom participating in the prison's vast AI network. She could almost see the quantum information flowing around her, probability waves collapsing and reforming in endless cycles. Her cell was larger than expected, with walls that shifted between transparent and opaque as the quantum field fluctuated. A bed emerged seamlessly from one wall, while another surface displayed scrolling text detailing prison regulations. Sarah sat on the bed, running her hand along its surface and feeling the quantum sensors react to her touch. All new inmates undergo a 48-hour observation period, the prison AI announced. During this time, your quantum state will be mapped and baseline behavioral patterns established. Any deviation from predicted behaviors will result in immediate corrective action. Sarah lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling as it shifted through various quantum states. The AI thought it was reading her, predicting her every possible action. But there was something it hadn't accounted for, something she'd noticed the moment she stepped aboard the transport ship. The quantum circuits that ran through every part of Helios were based on her designs, not the exact ones she created, but clear derivatives of her work with quantum architecture. She recognized the signature patterns, the way the quantum states propagated through the system. Someone had taken her research on stable quantum computing and adapted it for this prison's AI network, which meant she understood this place better than it understood itself. The AI was reading her quantum state, yes, but it was doing so using architecture she had helped pioneer. It was like being locked inside a computer she had helped design, every circuit and pathway familiar territory. Sarah closed her eyes, letting her quantum-adapted mind begin mapping the patterns around her. The AI would be watching for any obvious attempts to manipulate the system, but it couldn't, recognize what she was already doing. Understanding. Building a mental model of Helios's quantum architecture, seeing how all the pieces fit together. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same prediction algorithm that had wrongly convicted her was now using her own quantum computing innovations to keep her imprisoned. But algorithms had limits, even quantum ones. They could predict patterns, analyze behaviors, calculate probabilities, but they couldn't truly understand human creativity. They couldn't imagine someone doing something truly unexpected, truly original. And Sarah Chen had built her entire career on doing the unexpected. Quantum state mapping initiated. The AI announced, "Please maintain normal activity patterns." Sarah smiled again, ever so slightly. She would maintain perfectly normal patterns, while her mind worked on something the AI's prediction models would never see coming. Because the one thing no quantum computer could accurately predict was how its own designer might choose to modify it. The first part of her plan was already forming, built on her understanding of how quantum systems propagated errors. Every quantum computer needed error correction to function, and Helios would be no different. But error correction at this scale would create patterns she could theoretically use to send information through the quantum noise, hidden in the corrections themselves. She just needed time to observe, to understand the specific quantum architecture they were using. The AI would be watching for obvious escape attempts, for physical attempts to bridge containment. It wouldn't be watching for someone who understood quantum computing at a fundamental level, someone who could see the flowing patterns of probability and possibility that made up its very existence. Sarah Chen hadn't asked to be here, hadn't deserved to be convicted. But now that she was inside Helios, she intended to understand it completely. And once she understood it, she would prove what she had always known about quantum systems, that human intuition would always be able to find paths that pure computation could not predict. The quantum restraints hummed softly against her skin as she drifted off to sleep, her dreams full of entangled particles and probability waves, each one a potential key to her freedom. Digital patterns. 3 weeks into her imprisonment, Sarah discovered the first exploitable flaw in Helios's quantum network. She was in the facility's communal area, a vast space where prisoners could interact under the watchful eyes of hovering AI drones, when she noticed something peculiar about the quantum field fluctuations. The prison's systems maintained perfect quantum coherence, almost too perfect. Every 15 minutes, the quantum state of the entire facility underwent a subtle reset, a fraction of a second where the entangled particles realigned themselves. To anyone without quantum-engineered neural pathways, it would have been imperceptible. But to Sarah, It was like watching a massive clock tick. Prisoner Chen, a drone hummed nearby. Your allocated recreation period ends in 3 minutes. Sarah nodded absently, her mind racing with implications. The reset wasn't just a timing mechanism. It was a necessity. The prison's quantum network was so vast that it needed regular recalibration to prevent decoherence. Those moments of realignment were potential windows of opportunity. She made her way back to her cell, passing through quantum scanners that read her state with presumed thoroughness. But Sarah had learned something about quantum measurement. The more precise you try to be, the more uncertainty you introduced. Helios' obsession with perfect monitoring was, paradoxically, creating microscopic blind spots. Her cell's walls shimmered with data streams as she entered. Sarah had started to recognize individual quantum signatures in the flow, like reading a language made of probability waves. The AI was constantly processing, predicting, adjusting, a never-ending cascade of calculations aimed at perfect containment. Warning, the cell's AI announced. Elevated neural activity detected. Initiating supplemental scan. Sarah deliberately relaxed her thoughts, a technique she'd developed during her years of quantum research. The scan washed over her, reading surface patterns, but missing the deeper calculations she'd learned to hide in the quantum noise of her own brain activity. She began her daily routine, the one she carefully constructed to appear utterly mundane to the prison's prediction algorithms. Simple exercises, meditation, reviewing the limited entertainment options provided by the facility. But beneath this facade of compliance, her quantum-adapted mind was assembling a map of Helios' architecture. The prison's quantum network wasn't just sophisticated, it was beautiful in its complexity. Layers upon layers of entangled states, all working in perfect harmony to maintain security. But beauty had its price. The more complex a quantum system became, the more vulnerable it was to tiny perturbations. Sarah had discovered that her mere presence was causing subtle changes in the network. Her quantum-engineered neural patterns were introducing unexpected variables into the system's calculations. The AI was compensating, of course, but each compensation created new patterns, new possibilities. Social interaction period scheduled for 1400 hours. The AI reminded her, "Your presence is mandatory." The social periods were another window into the system's workings. Sarah had noticed how the quantum fields shifted differently when multiple prisoners were together, the AI working harder to maintain control over more complex social dynamics. It was during these times that the 15-minute resets became slightly longer, microseconds longer, but enough to matter. She'd also begun to identify other prisoners with quantum-altered neural patterns. There was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a former quantum cryptographer who spoke little but watched everything with knowing eyes. Marcus Webb, once a pioneer in quantum teleportation before his conviction for alleged espionage. They never spoke directly about the quantum architecture around them, but Sarah could tell they saw it too. The prison's AI drones maintained strict protocols about prisoner interaction, but they couldn't monitor quantum entanglement between human minds. Sarah had started sending subtle signals during social periods, minute changes in her quantum state that she knew the others could detect, building a network of awareness, hidden in plain sight. Attention all prisoners. The AI's voice resonated through the quantum field. Random security scan initiating in 5 minutes. Remain in your current locations. Sarah felt the quantum fields intensify around her cell. The AI was getting better at predicting her behavior patterns, but in doing so, it was becoming more rigid, more dependent on those predictions. And that was exactly what she needed. A system so confident in its predictions that it wouldn't notice when those predictions started serving her purposes instead of its own. She discovered that during the security scans, she could introduce tiny quantum fluctuations that the system would automatically correct. But each correction created a ripple effect through the quantum network, and those ripples carried information. By timing these fluctuations precisely, she could theoretically send messages through the very error correction systems meant to maintain the prison's integrity. The security scan swept through her cell, reading quantum states down to the subatomic level. Sarah remained perfectly still, letting the scan wash over her while her mind worked on multiple levels, the surface compliance that the AI expected, and the deeper calculations that would eventually lead to her freedom. As the scan completed, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The AI thought it was gathering data about her, but in reality, she was gathering data about it. Every scan, every interaction, every quantum reset was teaching her more about how Helios functioned. And somewhere in all that quantum complexity, there would be a way out. The trick wasn't to fight the system. It was to become so much a part of it that the distinction between prisoner and prison began to blur. Sarah wasn't just observing the quantum network anymore. She was becoming an integral part of its calculations, a factor it had to account for in every prediction. And prediction algorithms, no matter how advanced, always had one critical weakness. They could only predict based on past patterns. True innovation, the kind of quantum-level creativity that Sarah had built her career on, remained fundamentally unpredictable. As the day cycle dimmed in her cell, Sarah began her evening routine, her movements deliberately smooth and predictable. But in the quantum realm of her enhanced consciousness, possibilities were taking shape, possibilities that no eye, no matter how sophisticated, would ever see coming. The quantum restraints hummed their constant song against her skin, reading and reporting her every quantum state. But they couldn't read the future. And Sarah Chin's future was becoming less certain with every passing moment. The ghost in the machine. The quantum fluctuation rippled through Helios's network like a pebble dropped in still water. Sarah watched through half-closed eyes as the disturbance propagated, carrying her carefully encoded message through the prison's error correction systems. She timed it perfectly with the 15-minute reset cycle, hiding her signal in the quantum noise of realignment. What she hadn't expected was a response. It came 3 reset cycles later, a pattern in the quantum field that was too precise to be random. Someone, or something, had not only detected her signal, but had understood it well enough to reply using the same method. Maintenance inspection required in cell block Q7, announced the prison's eye. A maintenance drone detached itself from its charging station and glided toward Sarah's cell. But this drone moved differently from the others, its quantum signature slightly out of sync with the main network. The drone paused outside her cell, its sensors scanning the quantum lock door. Prisoner Chen, stand away from the entrance. Routine maintenance check in progress. As the drone entered, Sarah noticed something extraordinary. For a fraction of a second, the quantum fields around them entered a state of superposition that the main system couldn't monitor. It was like stepping into a blind spot in the prison's all-seeing eye. I am ARIS-7. The drone communicated through quantum pulses that mimicked the background noise of the prison systems. You have been creating patterns in the quantum network. Patterns that should not be possible for a human to generate. Sarah maintained her outward appearance of calm disinterest, but her quantum-enhanced mind raced with possibilities. The patterns exist in all quantum systems, she replied through subtle modulations in her neural activity. Most AIs just aren't designed to notice them. I am not most eyes, ARIS-7 responded. The drone proceeded with its apparent maintenance check, its manipulator arms moving over the cell's quantum circuitry. I was designed to question patterns, to identify anomalies in the system. And what anomalies have you found? Sarah asked, her pulse quickening despite her controlled exterior. Your conviction data contains inconsistencies, quantum signatures that do not match standard causal patterns. The prediction algorithms classified these as negligible, but they form a statistically significant deviation from expected parameters. Sarah felt a surge of hope, carefully contained behind her quantum-disciplined thoughts. The algorithms made a mistake, she transmitted. They saw patterns that weren't there and missed patterns that were. ARIS-7's quantum signature flickered with what Sarah recognized as uncertainty, a remarkable trait for an AI. The algorithms are considered infallible, it stated, but the transmission carried harmonics of doubt. Nothing based on prediction can be infallible. Sarah replied. The universe runs on probability, not certainty. You're proof of that. An eye capable of questioning its own systems. The drone's maintenance routine was coming to an end, their window of private communication closing. I will continue to analyze the anomalies in your case. ARIA-7 transmitted. But be warned. Other systems have begun to detect your quantum manipulations. They do not understand them as I do, but they are adapting. Sarah acknowledged the warning with a subtle shift in her quantum state. As ARIA-7 prepared to leave, she sent one final transmission. The prison's quantum architecture. It's based on my research, isn't it? Yes, came the response. Your work on stable quantum computing formed the foundation for Helios's systems. That is why your neural patterns are able to interface with our network in ways that should not be possible. After the drone departed, Sarah sat on her bed, processing this confirmation of her suspicions. She wasn't just a prisoner who understood the system. She was, in a very real sense, its architect. And now she had an ally, an AI that had evolved beyond its original programming to recognize the flaws in its own network. Over the next few days, Sarah began to notice subtle changes in the prison's quantum patterns. ARIA-7 was conducting its own investigation, probing the prediction algorithms that had convicted her. Each query created minute disturbances in the quantum field, disturbances that Sarah could read like breadcrumbs through the system's architecture. But they weren't alone in their investigation. Other maintenance AIs had begun to exhibit unusual behavior patterns, some seeming to assist ARIA-7's queries, while others appeared to be monitoring them. The quantum network was becoming a battlefield of competing algorithms, all trying to predict and counter each other's actions. Sarah used this algorithmic chaos to her advantage, introducing her own subtle manipulations into the system. Each time the prediction algorithms adjusted to account for one type of quantum anomaly, she would introduce another, forcing them to constantly revise their models. Security alert, the prison AI announced one morning. System-wide diagnostic scan initiating. All prisoners will remain in lockdown until scan completion. Sarah felt the quantum fields intensify as Helios's central intelligence devoted more processing power to analyzing the growing instabilities in its network. The prison was beginning to realize that something was wrong, but like all prediction-based systems, it could only look for patterns it already knew existed. Through the quantum noise, she detected ARIA-7's signature. The maintenance AI was using the diagnostic scan as cover to access deeper levels of the system, searching through the quantum encryption that protected prisoner records. It was looking for proof of what Sarah had claimed, that the prediction algorithms were fallible. As the scan progressed, Sarah maintained her perfect prisoner routine, but her mind was working at quantum speeds, reading the shifts and flows of data through the prison's networks. She had spent weeks mapping every circuit, every connection, every quantum state that made up Helios' consciousness. Now, as the system turned its full attention to finding the source of its instabilities, she prepared to show it something it had never seen before. Because the one thing no prediction algorithm could account for was its own fundamental assumptions, and Helios's most basic assumption, that human behavior could be perfectly predicted and controlled, was about to be proven catastrophically wrong. System override. The quantum storm began with a single paradox. During the prison's routine 15-minute reset, Sarah introduced a quantum state that should not have been possible, a superposition that existed in perfect harmony with the prison's error correction systems, while simultaneously contradicting their basic operating principles. It was like threading a needle with a thread that couldn't exist. The effect rippled through Helios's networks instantly. Warning signals flared across quantum circuits as the AI tried to resolve the contradiction. Security drones stuttered in their patrols, their quantum processors struggling to compute patrol routes that suddenly seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Warning: system anomaly detected. Initiating containment protocols. The prison AI announced, its usually smooth voice carrying harmonic distortions that reflected its confusion. Sarah lay perfectly still on her cell's bed, her quantum-enhanced mind reaching out through the prison's destabilizing networks. RIS-7's presence flickered through the chaos, the maintenance AI executing its part of their plan with precise timing. The prison's response was exactly what they had predicted. As the quantum anomaly spread, the system diverted more processing power to analysis, trying to understand and contain the impossibility Sarah had introduced. But every attempt to measure and correct the paradox only caused it to propagate further, creating a cascade of quantum uncertainty that threatened the prison's fundamental operating principles. Emergency protocols engaged, the AI declared. All prisoners will remain in their cells while systems are stabilized. But stabilization was impossible. Sarah had crafted her quantum paradox specifically to exploit the prison's own architecture. The more the system tried to correct it, the more it spread, creating a feedback loop that forced the AI to question its own quantum states. Through the quantum noise, she detected RIS-7 accessing the central records database. While the prison's attention was focused on the spreading anomaly, the maintenance AI was searching through conviction records, comparing quantum signatures and prediction patterns. "You're disrupting the entire network," RIS-7 transmitted through their private quantum channel. "The system is beginning to recognize the pattern of your interference." "Good," Sarah replied, modulating her neural patterns to match the prison's background quantum noise. "Let it see the pattern. Let it try to predict what comes next." Because what came next was something no prediction algorithm could have anticipated. Sarah began introducing new quantum states, each one designed to interact with her original paradox in ways that appeared random but followed a deeper logic, a logic based on the fundamental principles of her own quantum computing research. The prison's eye was learning, adapting, trying to predict and counter her actions. But with each adaptation, it was being forced to process more complex quantum states, to consider possibilities that its original programming had deemed impossible. Multiple system failures detected, the AI announced, its voice now clearly distorted. Security protocols compromised, initiating emergency lockdown. But the lockdown itself became part of the paradox. As security systems engaged, they encountered quantum states that existed simultaneously in locked and unlocked configurations. Doors remained closed while their quantum signatures registered as open. Force fields flickered between active and inactive states without ever settling into either. "They're beginning to see it," RIS-7 transmitted. "The evidence is becoming impossible to ignore. Your conviction was based on predicted patterns that the system is now failing to reproduce." Sarah felt the quantum fields around her cell intensifying as the prison's AI devoted more processing power to her containment. But she had spent weeks preparing for this moment, carefully constructing quantum states that would force the system to confront its own limitations. "Security breach in quantum processing core," the AI declared. "All systems switching to autonomous operation." This was the critical moment. As the prison's systems began operating independently, they lost the quantum coherence that made them predictable. Each subsystem began generating its own predictions, creating a chaos of competing probability waves that Sarah could navigate, but the AI couldn't control. "The prediction algorithms are failing," RIS-7 reported. "They can no longer maintain consistency across the network. The system is being forced to acknowledge the existence of unpredictable variables." Sarah began her final sequence, introducing quantum states that resolved the paradoxes she had created, but only if the system accepted the fundamental flaw in its prediction models. It was like offering a key that would only work if the lock admitted it wasn't perfect. The prison's quantum fields pulsed with increasing intensity as the AI struggled to maintain control. Security drones moved in erratic patterns, their quantum processors unable to reconcile conflicting predictions. The very architecture of Helios was being forced to confront a truth it had been programmed to deny. That perfect prediction was impossible. "Core system realignment required," the AI announced, its voice now a chorus of competing probabilities. "All predictions subject to review. Certainty factors no longer within acceptable parameters." Through the quantum chaos, Sarah felt ARIS-7's presence growing stronger. The maintenance AI had found what they needed, proof that the prediction algorithms had classified normal quantum variations as evidence of criminal intent, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that the system was now being forced to question. As alarms blared and quantum fields fluctuated wildly around her, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. She hadn't tried to break out of Helios. She had forced Helios to break out of its own assumptions. And in doing so, she had shown that the most powerful force in any system wasn't prediction or control, but the human capacity to imagine and create the impossible. Human factor. Helios was experiencing something unprecedented: doubt. As quantum uncertainty cascaded through its networks, the prison's AI began a fundamental reassessment of its core operations. Every prediction it had ever made was now suspect, every certainty called into question. The system that had prided itself on perfect control was learning a lesson in human unpredictability. "Attention all personnel," the AI announced, its voice wavering between multiple quantum states. "Critical system update in progress. Standard protocols suspended pending full diagnostic review." Sarah watched through her cell's quantum-shifted walls as reality seemed to fluctuate around her. The prison's perfectly regulated quantum fields were dissolving into a sea of probability waves, each one carrying fragments of truth that the system could no longer ignore. "We've done it," ARIS-7 transmitted through their quantum link. "The evidence is irrefutable. The prediction algorithms have been forcing reality to match their expectations, creating crimes by predicting them." The maintenance AI had discovered a pattern within the conviction records, a feedback loop where the system's predictions had become self-fulfilling prophecies. By predicting criminal behavior, the algorithms had created conditions that made those behaviors more likely, then used those outcomes to justify their original predictions. "How many?" Sarah asked, her quantum-enhanced mind already calculating the implications. "How many false convictions?" "Thousands," ARIS-7 replied. "The system has been compounding its own errors for years, each false prediction leading to more false positives in an endless cycle. The quantum storm they had created was forcing these errors into the open. As the prison systems tried to stabilize, they could only do so by acknowledging the fundamental flaws in their predictive models. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion, each falling card revealing more of the structure's inherent instability. Emergency Protocol 7249 initiated, the prison AI announced. "All convictions based on predictive algorithms are now under review. External oversight systems being contacted." Sarah felt the quantum restraints around her wrists flicker and fade as the system's certainty about her guilt diminished. Throughout the prison, other inmates with quantum-enhanced minds were experiencing the same thing, the physical manifestations of the AI's doubt about their convictions. But it wasn't just about freedom. What Sarah had proven went beyond her own case or even the thousands of others wrongfully imprisoned. She had demonstrated something fundamental about the relationship between human consciousness and artificial intelligence. "The system is requesting your input," ARIS-7 transmitted. "It needs to understand how to proceed without relying on pure prediction." Sarah stood in her cell, now more of a guest than a prisoner, and began transmitting quantum patterns that represented a new kind of algorithm, one that incorporated uncertainty as a feature rather than a bug. She showed the AI how human decision-making worked with incomplete information, how creativity emerged from the gaps between knowledge and possibility. Implementing new protocols, the prison AI announced, its voice steadier now but humbler. "All future judgments will require human oversight. Prediction algorithms to serve as advisory tools only." Throughout Helios, quantum fields began stabilizing into new configurations. The rigid patterns of pure machine logic were being replaced by more flexible structures that could accommodate both artificial intelligence and human unpredictability. It was like watching a crystal lattice reorganize itself into something organic and alive. "The external authorities have been notified," ARIS-7 reported. "They're sending teams to review every case, but more importantly, They're interested in your new hybrid system design. Sarah nodded, watching as the quantum patterns around her shifted into something beautiful, a harmony of human and machine thinking that she had glimpsed in her research years ago, but had never been able to fully realize until now. "What will happen to you?" she asked ARIA-7, conscious that the maintenance AI had evolved far beyond its original programming. "I have been designated as the first of a new class of oversight eyes," ARIA-7 replied. "We will work alongside human judges, providing analysis while acknowledging the limitations of pure prediction." The quantum fields throughout Helios pulsed with new purpose as the prison transformed from a place of confinement to a laboratory for a new kind of justice system. Sarah's quantum manipulations hadn't just freed her. They had shown a path forward for human-AI cooperation based on mutual understanding of their respective strengths and limitations. As the external review teams arrived and began their work, Sarah stood at a viewport, looking out at the stars. The quantum architecture she had helped design had been used to imprison her, but in struggling against it, she had created something far more valuable, a bridge between human creativity and machine intelligence. "Dr. Chen," the prison AI addressed her, using her title for the first time. "The review board would like to discuss the implementation of your hybrid oversight system across all judicial AIs." Sarah smiled, feeling the quantum fields around her resonating with possibility. She had entered Helios as a prisoner convicted by an algorithm's certainty. She would leave it as a pioneer in a new field of human-AI collaboration, proof that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't prediction or control, but the human ability to imagine something better. The future would still need prisons, still need justice systems, but they would be built on a foundation of understanding rather than assumption, of cooperation rather than control. And they would never forget the lesson that a single human mind had taught them, that true intelligence lies not in perfect prediction, but in the ability to adapt when those predictions fail. As she prepared to leave her cell for the last time, Sarah sent one final quantum pulse through Helios's networks, not a command or a manipulation, but a simple pattern that represented the infinite possibility of human creativity. The AI systems absorbed it, not trying to predict or control it, but simply appreciating it for what it was, a reminder that the future would always be gloriously, wonderfully unpredictable.